ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. First of all, offer my millions of obeisances to lotus feet of Asmadi Gurupad Padmanitila Prashta Jagat Guru Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, Tirandi Swami Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Dandi Maharaj, Namnishta Santa Shri Aniruddha Das Prabhuji, all the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, please accept my humble obeisances. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, Text 21. Canto 2 is titled The Cosmic Manifestation. Chapter 6 is titled Purush Sukta Confirmed. Sruti Vichakrame Vishwang Sashanana Shane Ubhe Yada Vidya Cha Purushastu Hayashraya. Sruti, the destination of the living entities. Vichakrame, exist comprehensively. Vishwan, the all-pervading personality of Godhead. Shasana, activities of lording it over. Anashani, activities in devotional service. Ubhe, both. Yad, what is. Avidya, nations. Cha, as well as. Vidya, factual knowledge. Cha, and. Purushaha, the Supreme Person. Tu, but. Ubhaya, for both of them. Ashraya, the Master. Translation. By his energies, the all-pervading personality of Godhead is thus comprehensively the Master in the activities of controlling and in devotional service. He is the ultimate Master of both nations and factual knowledge of all situations. Purport. The word Vishwan is significant in this verse. One who travels perfectly in every field of activity is called the Purusha or Kshetragya. These two terms, Kshetragya and Purusha, are equally applicable in both the individual self and the Supreme Self, the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 13.3, the matter is explained as follows. Kshetragyan chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetragnayor jnanam yatyajnanam matam mama. Kshetra means the place, and one who knows the place is called the Kshetragya. The individual self knows about his limited field of activities. But the Supreme Self, the Lord, knows about the unlimited field of activities. The individual soul knows about his own thinking, feeling and willing activities. But the Super Soul or the Paramatma, the Supreme Controller being present everywhere, knows everyone's thinking, feeling and willing. And as such, the individual living entity is the minute master of his personal affairs, whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master of everyone's affairs, past, present and future. Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mam tu vedana kashyana. This is a verse from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, titled Knowledge of the Absolute, verse 26. O Arjuna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. O Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me no one knows. Only the ignorant person does not know this difference between the Lord and the living entities. The living entities, as distinguished from the incognizant matter, may be qualitatively equal to the Lord in cognizance, but the living entity can never be equal to the Lord in full knowledge of past, present and future. And because the living entity is partially cognizant, he is therefore sometimes forgetful of his own identity. This forgetfulness is specifically manifested in the field of the Ekapad Vibhuti of the Lord or in the material world. But in the Tripad Vibhuti field of actions or in the spiritual world, there is no forgetfulness by the living entities who are free from all kinds of contaminations resulting from the forgetful state of existence. The material body is the symbol of the gross and subtle form of forgetfulness. Therefore, the whole atmosphere of the material world is called avidya or nations, whereas the whole atmosphere of the spiritual world is called vidya or full of knowledge. There are different stages of avidya and they are called dharma, artha and moksha. The idea of moksha or liberation held by the monist in the matter of oneness of the living entity and the Lord by ultimate merging in one is also the last stage of materialism or forgetfulness. Knowledge of the qualitative oneness of the self and super self is partial knowledge and ignorance, also because there is no knowledge of quantitative difference as explained above. The individual self can never be equal to the Lord in cognizance, otherwise he could be placed in the state of forgetfulness. So because the individual self can never be equal to the Lord in cognizance, otherwise he could not be placed in the state of forgetfulness. So because there is a stage of forgetfulness of the individual selves or the living entities, there is always a gulf of difference between the Lord and the living entity as between the part and the whole. The part is never equal to the whole. So the conception of 100% equality of the living being with the Lord is also nations. In the field of nations, activities are directed towards lording it over the creation. In the material world, therefore, everyone is engaged in acquiring material opulence to lord it over the material world. Therefore, there is always clash and frustration, which are the symptoms of nations. But in the field of knowledge, there is devotional service to the Lord, bhakti. Therefore, there is no chance of being contaminated by the influence of nations or forgetfulness. Avidya in the liberated stage of devotional activities. The Lord is thus the proprietor of the fields both of nations and of cognition, and it remains the choice of the living entity to exist in either of the above regions. Text 22. Yasmat dandam virat jagge bhutendriya gunatmaka tadravya mattagat vishwam gobi sujaiva tapan. Yasmat, from whom, Andam, the universal globes, Virat, and the gigantic universal form, Jagge appeared, Bhuta, elements, Indriya, senses, Guna Atmaka, qualitative, Tadravyam, the universes, and the universal form, etc., Atyagat, surpassed, Vishwam, all the universes, Gobhi, by the rays, Surjaha, the sun, Eva, like Atapan, distributed rays and heat. From the personality of Godhead, all the universal globes and the universal form, with all material elements, qualities and senses are generated. Yet he is aloof from such material manifestations. Like the sun, which is separate from its rays and heat. The supreme truth has been asserted in the previous verse as Purusha or the Purushottama, the supreme person. The absolute person is the Ishvara or the supreme controller by his different energies. The Ekapad Vibhuti manifestation of the material energy of the Lord is just like one of the many mistresses of the Lord by whom the Lord is not much attracted, as indicated in the language of the Gita, Binna Prakriti. But the region of the Tripad Vibhuti, being a pure spiritual manifestation of the energy of the Lord, is so to speak more attractive to him. The Lord therefore generates the material manifestations by impregnating the material energy. And then within the manifestation, he expands himself as a gigantic form of the Vishwarup. The Vishwarup, as it was shown to Arjuna, is not the original form of the Lord. The original form of the Lord is the transcendental form of Purushottama or Krishna himself. It is very nicely explained herein that he expands himself just like the sun. The sun expands himself by its terrible heat and rays, yet the sun is always aloof from such rays and heat. The impersonalist takes into consideration the rays of the Lord without any information of the tangible, transcendental, eternal form of the Lord, known as Krishna. Therefore, Krishna in his supreme personal form, with two hands and flute is bewildering for the impersonalist who can accommodate only the gigantic Vishwarup of the Lord. They should know that the rays of the sun are secondary to the sun, and similarly the impersonal gigantic form of the Lord is also secondary to the impersonal form as Purushottama. The Brahma Samhita 5.37 confirms this statement as follows. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibha Vitavis Taviryaiva Nijarupataya Kalavi Golok Eva Nivasati Akhilatma Bhuto Govindamati Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Govinda, the one who enlivens the senses of everyone by his personal bodily rays, resides in his transcendental abode called Golok. Yet he is present in every nook and corner of his creation by expansion of happy spiritual rays equal in power to his personal potency of bliss. He is therefore simultaneously personal and impersonal by his inconceivable potency, or he is the one without a second, displaying complete unity in a diversity of material and spiritual manifestation. He is separate from everything and still nothing is different from him. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpataruvescha kripa sindhubheva paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.